Production funding for Behind the Headlines is made possible in part by the WKNO Production Fund, the WKNO Endowment Fund, and by viewers like you. Thank you.
$6 million for the police, studying a convention center hotel, and property values are on the rise. Those stories and more tonight on Behind the Headlines. I'm Eric Barnes, publisher of the Memphis Daily News. Thanks for joining us. I'm joined tonight by a roundtable of journalists. Ryan Poe, reporter with the Commercial Appeal. Thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me.
Bill Dries, a senior reporter with the Memphis Daily News. Thanks for being here. And Burnell Smith is publisher of the New Tri-State Defender. So we'll start with police has been heavy on the minds, and I think last week it was, Bill, that we were talking with some members of City Council about this $6 million that the Crime Commission wants to give to the city to use as retention bonuses and money for the police department. The union, all the unions, I think, are not real happy about this. Talk a little bit about the dynamic right now of what's going on with that $6 million.
Well, as you heard from the three council members last week, the council really didn't have a problem with this. It's $6.1 million from the Crime Commission from private donors that they gave, and it's over a 4-year period to be used for police retention bonuses. The council's approved it, so it's going to happen. The Memphis Police Association's argument was that it was circumventing the contract negotiation process with them. The council didn't see it that way. The administration of Mayor Jim Strickland said that, no, we can do that, and we have done that.
Yeah, Burnell, your thoughts on that? I mean, it's on the one hand, I mean, it certainly fulfills Strickland's goal of trying to retain police, get closer to that 2,400 number. We're at 1,900, almost 2,000 police officers right now. But it's not a typical way of funding the police.
Right, and I think that's part of the hesitation on the union's part, is that, is this a sustainable measure? Also, is there outside private influence, because you don't know necessarily who these donors are. And so, I think there are legitimate questions about, the funding and its sustainability, but at the same time, it gets us to the goal of really helping to undergird and uplift our public servants.
Right. Ryan Poe, your thoughts on it.
And also, this isn't the first time that the administration has done this. They funded their transition plan through a similar way of using community foundation grants. So I think the Memphis Police Association is really wondering, is this going to continue? And don't we have these rules in place so people can know who's funding our government? Right. So I think that's kind of the concern. And so far, the Strickland administration seems to have be staying the course. They don't want to reveal that the donors, and I think they're going to continue receiving grants like this.
Yeah, and this is all against the backdrop of the list, and we haven't had just schedules. We haven't had you on. You obviously have been covering this. What I don't even know this week. I've been sort of out of town for part of it. What is going on with the list right now? This was the list of originally 80 people, protesters or others who were on a list that had to be escorted if they were in City Hall. At least half of them were taken off the list. What is the update there?
Yeah, so the latest on it is that the American Civil Liberties Union has joined one of the lawsuits suing the city for alleged police surveillance of protesters. Right now, the lawsuits are just going through their traditional, normal phase, and no real updates there. But that was the biggest news. The ACLU is now
and they did have standing. Was that right, Bill? Because back to the consent order, the federal consent order from 1978. Some of the groups who had sued, someone told me who was involved, they didn't have standing in the court. The ACLU back to 1978 did, right?
Right, but standing will be an issue that they will get into, because the city's response to the lawsuit is that the 1978 consent decree was not a permanent consent decree. Their position is that these plaintiffs do not have standing in terms of the people who were actually on the list.
Right, and we did ask some of the people who are on the list to be on the show, but because of the lawsuits, they couldn't be on. Maybe at some point they will, because there are all kinds of perspectives on this. But this again with protesting, Ryan, some protesters were denied a permit this week. Who were going to be protesting what?
Yeah, they were going to be protesting the Dakota Access Pipeline, which has been a big controversy. President Obama took that off the table briefly, temporarily, and I think that's been since restarted. So that people are very upset about this, environmental activists, and they were planning a march from Beale Street Landing to City Hall, and in that the city did not grant the permit because they didn't follow the procedures required. Didn't give a 14-day advance notice.
Right.
So.
Yeah, Burnell, thoughts on this? I mean, again, we've talked about this protest culture, and you know, and to some degree, I'm being unfair when I say protesters. I think some people view that as a negative term. I mean, they are advocates for their position. I mean, so I should have a better way of talking about it.
Exactly, and they were, you know, joining sort of a national movement where there was going to be simultaneous protests in different places around the country, and so, you know, I think it does bring into question somewhat this administration's position as it relates to people who are exercising their First Amendment rights. And so, you know, we've had sort of trepidation with these, you know, protesters, whether it be the folks that got on the list or, you know, and now this denial of this permit, you know, even with the bridge situation that happened last year, you know, I don't know. I mean, I think there's something that, you know, remains to be seen in terms of what ultimately Mayor Strickland's position is relative to people who are protesting in the city.
And forgive me if you had just said this, but I mean, the city's position was that there are standards, you have to have 14 days notice, you have to do certain things, and not all that had been done. They did not, from their point of view, they did not shut down this march because for political reasons or they were opposed to these protesters' position. It was more, they have standards that have to be met.
But but the city's reasoning on this also was that it would disrupt the downtown businesses along the Main Street Mall, and apparently there is some kind of requirement that you have to have the approval of the Beale Street Merchants Association and the Downtown Memphis Commission. In what instance is the Beale Street Merchants Association going to say, yes, please go ahead, have a
and disrupt our traffic, disrupt our commerce on our street?
I mean, what became the bridge protest actually started as a march from the Civil Rights Museum to the plaza at FedEx Forum that came right down Beale Street. I don't remember that there was approval for that from the Beale Street Merchants Association.
Yeah, there was no approval in that situation. And there have been many of other instances where, you know, individuals have done things. Even we've done a couple of parades on Beale Street, and I don't ever remember having to go to either DMC or the Merchants Association to get approval. We just went through the city's process, got a permit was approved, we did our event.
And the other thing that I think comes into play here is this is a march that starts at Beale Street Landing. If you go north on Riverside Drive, it's a straight shot to the bridge.
Yeah.
So I think that might play a factor here.
That they might be trying to shut down the bridge?
I think that's one of the contingencies that the city might be planning for. In any event, the protesters say that they are going to march whether a permit is issued or not. Okay.
We will stay on policing and criminal justice. There was a headline that I think it was a breaking news alert for us, maybe for others, that the Justice Department had suspended its review of Memphis police, and then very quickly that was not the case. What happened there?
That's a good question.
The review by the Federal Justice Department has not been suspended.
No, it is not. The Justice Department a week ago put out a press release during the afternoon that said the collaborative review that the Memphis Police Department agreed to with us is not going to happen, period. No explanation. So, of course, people like me start calling City Hall and saying, what's up with this? While City Hall is getting its arms around what's happening, the Justice Department puts out another press release about maybe 2 hours later saying the collaborative review is back on and the city submitted the memorandum of understanding, which we said originally was the reason it was canceled. They did not say that the memorandum of understanding was why they had canceled it initially.
Right. Anyone, Ryan, thoughts on this?
I was actually off that day, but coming back, I asked around, and they said apparently Mayor Strickland had already signed the memorandum of understanding by the time the Department of Justice release came out. So it was almost like what happened was the city had been working with the local district attorney's office, who had not been communicating apparently with the Department of Justice to let them know that the city was on track. So that's what happened, and just
But this
crossed
review
wires.
continues.
Yeah,
Okay.
the review continues, but the backdrop for it in terms of national politics is interesting because since the city agreed to this collaborative review in October, of course, we have a new administration in the White House, and we have a new Attorney General by the name of Jeff Sessions, who has made it clear that he does not approve and that the kind of consent decrees with local police departments that we saw under the Obama administration are not something that he's interested in at all. This is different from those consent decrees because it's a collaborative review that the police department asked the Justice
And
Department.
they've done this in other cities
Yes.
across the country, right? I mean, it's just a review of police practices, incidents have happened, and it's kind of a in part, the idea is that they would come back, the idea in the past was they'd come back with some best practices, some changes to policies and so on. Right. Your thought, with the change in administration, it's a whole different Justice Department philosophy.
Absolutely, and I think Bill makes an interesting point relative to, under Attorney General Jeff Sessions, will those type of things be prioritized? Will they continue to be supported from a budget standpoint? And because clearly, under this Trump administration, they've really said we're going to be very, very pro law enforcement, not necessarily as interested, if you will, in sort of community police relations and how those things play out. So it'll be interesting to see if this thing continues to go down this sort of 2-year cycle that it has.
Right. I mean, Trump campaigned on bringing back stop and frisk across the country, which was a very controversial, some would say very effective, police tactic in New York and so on. Do we know anything more about the impact of this new Trump executive order on locally? Does anyone have any thoughts? It's okay if we don't. Okay. It's such a moving target in terms of these immigration orders and what the impact will be locally. I think more is to play out.
I think people are waiting to see, which was the case with the original travel ban. There were some immigration attorneys here who at that time were advising their clients that there's probably going to be a second revised order, and they were advising their clients if they were outside of the country to get back in, if they were here to not plan to leave.
Yeah, and you've still got the whole question, cities across the country, how much many cities do not want to participate in roundups and immigration enforcement and the whole sanctuary city, all that to play out, but that's still, we don't know enough yet, so I'm going to move on. But I will stay with law enforcement. There is a sheriff's race in 2018, Bill, and we're starting to learn a little bit more. The sheriff, not only you correct me where I'm wrong, in unincorporated Shelby County, they provide, their sheriff deputies provide regular policing. Also, the sheriff's office oversees the jail, which is a huge budget item, hugely important right now, and is very crowded. So who are these early contenders for the sheriff's race?
The early contenders are Floyd Bonner Jr., who is the chief deputy of the sheriff's department, currently under Sheriff Bill Oldham, and he intends to run in the Democratic primary in May of 2018. The other contender who is declared and out there as of the Lincoln Day Gala that the Republican Party had last month is Dale Lane, who is the head of the county's Office of Preparedness, also a former Shelby County Sheriff's deputy who actually ran for sheriff in the Republican primary in 2010.
Okay. And again, backdrop, we've talked a lot. I mean, it's just been a national conversation about policing. That conversation has shifted somewhat with a new federal administration. But your thoughts locally, Burnell, on what the kind of questions that will need to be asked of this new sheriff's candidate?
Yeah, I mean, just in terms of overall management of our jail system, we've had a lot of trouble and difficulties with computer systems and upgrades and people not being able to be processed through the system in a timely manner. Just in terms of overall relationships, again, community. I mean, the sheriff's department has the ability to execute the warrants that are out there. So I think there are a lot of questions. I also think that there are some interesting additional candidates that may, arise.
It is early, to say the least.
Yeah, it is early. Even the name of former police director Tony Armstrong has been bantered about, and maybe interest there, may not. But I think it's early, and we'll see how it plays out.
It'll also be interesting. We've talked on the show about the state passed a law, give or take a year ago, that allowed localities to handle juvenile offenses differently.
Right.
Really truancy, delinquency, not violent crime, not anything like that, and not put them into the criminal justice system as an attempt to not expose them to that. Right. There's a lot of, I don't think that's been fully implemented yet by any stretch. There's a lot of money, a lot of decisions that have to happen, but that would be under the sheriff. It would be in part under the sheriff.
The sheriff's department now handles detention for Shelby County Juvenile Court.
Right. Okay. Well, we'll stay with the county for a second. And Ryan Poe, there was a county commission compensation study. Tell us about the study and where that stands.
Yeah. So this has been going on since last year. I think maybe July or August of last year. The county has been studying compensation, looking to see how many employees are not getting paid what they should compared to other, the market. And they came back and said 3,000 employees actually need their pay adjusted, and that's going to mean $4.9 million every year, more like $6 in 2017, to adjust those employees' pay. So this is going to be a huge process, ongoing. The Mayor Luttrell said he's planning to introduce or ask the commission to pass a resolution that would basically let them begin this process. So that should happen pretty soon. But yeah, that was the big news.
But there was some pushback, if I remember right, from your article, from Terry Rowland, candidate for mayor and county commissioner, former head of the county commission, been on the show, that he really wants the first thing to get taken care of is
the Shelby County corrections officers, and that's really been the main driver of this compensation study. Is these officers were at the commission last budget cycle pushing for higher pay, and the commission set aside $1 million to, as Commissioner Rowland said, to make them whole. Yeah. And they have not done that yet, and Mayor Luttrell doesn't want to do that just for them. He wants to do it for everybody. So that's the conflict right now.
And we'll use that as a segue, Bill, to and to all of us. But I'll start with you, Bill. It is a reappraisal year, so tax reappraisal notices, property values for residences and commercial properties, industrial properties have started going out. They will all of Shelby County will have received their new tax appraisal value from the assessor's office by end of this month, give or take. Already some of the suburban areas have gotten their notices, and people talking. It's all very anecdotal at this point, but people talking about big increases.
Yes,
and we know from from our real estate information company, another division of the Daily News, that overall property sales were up 15% last year. Residential were, a lot of markets were up even more. The rumors out there that it'll be probably overall about 10% increase. A lot of increases in commercial. So what that means, and you're gonna correct me where I get this wrong. Every 4 years, when this reappraisal happens, there's a windfall law, so-called windfall law in Tennessee, that prevents the county or the cities or the municipalities from taking this increase in value and seeing a whole lot more money. So if right now the city budget is $650 million or give or take, and the property rate is 3 point whatever, they can't just leave the property tax rate the same and see a windfall because property values went up so much. They have to adjust that property value. Is that correct? Or that property tax rate?
It's a recertification of the rate every 4 years with the reappraisal. It cannot produce anything other than the same amount of revenue that the current rate produces. Right. If you want to raise taxes, then you have to, in a separate action after that, propose a tax hike, but you can't do it and, in effect, camouflage it with the recertification of the rate to take into account the reappraisal. Now, the caveat on that, though, is that producing that same amount of revenue remains pretty nebulous in terms of hitting a moving target. So the commission or the council can say, this is our best guess for how we produce the same amount of revenue, the rate that we need for that, but it might produce a little more, it might produce a little less, but usually they err on the side of it producing a little bit more because again, it's a moving target.
Well, this is not even this cynically. This is a politician's dream. Because the overall property value, the pot got bigger. Right. You're going to lower the rate, but you have a chance to lower it and maybe eke it back up or estimate somehow so you bring in more money to spend. And so you've lowered people's taxes, but you have more money to spend on public services, right?
Right, exactly. And you know, I mean, honestly, you know, back when we had the crash, of course, there was an adjustment, and you know, and all municipalities around, you know, sort of suffered from that. And particularly more so from the standpoint of the foreclosures and folks that were just not there to pay. And so now you've gotten, you know, more homeowners, more businesses, the whole 9 yards. So, you know, in that period of time, now you have even more payers than we had back then. So the adjustment should be favorable for local municipalities in this instance.
Your thoughts on that?
That's a good point, because when property values go up, that's just a sign that the whole economy is going up, and that's more tax dollars in a lot of ways. So, but yeah, I think this is going to be great for the city and county, good for their budgets. But whether they're going to, on the county end, I'm told that they're more likely to lower taxes than to raise them or keep it the same. And I suspect that that's going to be Mayor Strickland's policy as well. I don't see anyone raising taxes.
Yeah, I mean, I think in past years that they've done is they've brought it down, and but again, because of this estimating, they saw a little bit of a surplus, and then 1 year later they could inch it up just a little bit, but still be so much lower than where it was that they could see some that following year.
But if they do raise taxes, now is the time to do it, because if you wait future years, the closer you're going to get to elections.
It's a very good point.
It's
a very good point. It was an interesting, I will say, it was an event this week, an interesting dynamic. We'll do a future show on it, but the number of investor homes, just to highlight one thing out of this whole real estate review seminar I was at, that 25% of the single family homes in Memphis are owned by investors, most of them being rented out. It's a very interesting dynamic. People, that is not typical. I think pre-crash it was in the low 10%. It's now much, much higher, and there's just a lot to be seen about how that plays out over time. We will switch to the Convention Center and the St. Jude. Bill, this week, Convention Center, St. Jude, and Pinch, it's all an interrelated mechanism and a gateway, the gateway. But I guess the headline or the story was at first, St. Jude filed some planning paperwork with land use control, but then that gets into the Convention Center. So.
Well, actually, the city's Division of Housing and Community Development filed with the Land Use Control Board, which means that there's now a date that the Land Use Control Board is going to hear this. That date is April 13th. It will, by that date, probably go to the City Council for approval on April 25th. It's still a pretty general plan. That might change by the time the April 13th Land Use Control Board hearing comes up. And it's a plan basically for the 9-block area between the St. Jude campus to the east and the Pyramid to the west. There are a lot of moving parts on this, and the Gateway project is bigger than just that. And one of the pieces of it is a convention center hotel, which we haven't heard too much about since the beginning of the year. That's probably going to change. The Denver investor who initially came here and said he wanted the city to build and own a convention center hotel at Front and Poplar has been coming back to the city with more specific plans. The city has made it clear that the city will not be building and owning a hotel. There might be some incentives involved, but any construction or ownership of a hotel is going to be on private developers. So the city's about to hire a hotel consultant to not only look at how that project should work, but the project's impact on other hotels. The city's largest hotel is the original Convention Center Hotel, which is now a Sheraton, which is 600 rooms. So one of the questions that consultant will
explore.
We'll get into is what is the impact on the other hotels and how to make that work in concert with a new hotel.
And right, I mean, I can't, there are cities around the country that own convention center hotels, so we would not be the first city, but I can't imagine anything more contradictory with Strickland, what he ran on and what he said since then in terms of being brilliant in the basics. Running a hotel is not exactly within that. Nonetheless, I think the Strickland administration understands that there needs to be more convention center space, more convention center hotels downtown. What are you hearing about this whole initiative?
Yeah, the Strickland administration has been very, very consistent. They are not going to give money, operating dollars, city operating dollars to any kind of development, private development. They are going to, kind of guide that process. They want to see development, but yeah, no city dollars of that kind going to this.
And a lot of this is coming from a TIF through the whole downtown that might then fund redevelopment or some kind of improvements at Mud Island. Again, the Pinch area, the convention center, this gateway that kind of off the highway. Burnell, you probably get the last word here, about a minute left. Is this the right set of priorities? I mean, there's always a balancing act, and Strickland ran on kind of against the bright, shiny thing of Wharton having the pyramid and being focused on really big projects. At the same time, cities sometimes need big projects to fund their operations. So,
well, I mean, I think it's important, but I think he really has to look at a balance between how we redevelop and support neighborhoods and communities where people live, and work every day, versus these big projects like that. And of course, tourism and conventions is a big thing for our city, and we've got to undergird it and shore it up. But there's got to be a balance. And I think that's going to be critically important, not only to what happens over the next few years, but certainly as he looks toward the re-election in 2019.
And Graceland is open, real quickly?
Yes, Elvis Presley's Graceland, the 200,000 square foot entertainment complex, the second phase of the expansion there at $45 million, opened this past week. This is in effect replacing Graceland Plaza that we've all known for about 30 years on the other side of the street.
All right. Thank you all for being here. Thank you for joining us. Join us again next week. Dorsey Hobson from Superintendent of the Schools will be here. Thanks. See you then.